Hello, and welcome to the RCS Exchange Talks. Are you there? Great. Thank you for joining us this evening. I'm Emily Doolittle. I'm a research fellow and lecturer in composition at RCS. And I'll be chairing tonight's talk and introducing the speaker. Dr. Lekelia Jenkins is a marine sustainability scientist and science dance choreographer. She grew up in Baltimore, Maryland, fishing and crabbing recreationally on the Chesapeake Bay. During the summers, she prowled the grounds of the Baltimore Zoo as a junior zookeeper, learning about endangered species and conservation. A Meyerhoff Scholar, she graduated with a Bachelor of Science in Biology and a dance minor from the University of Maryland, Baltimore County. Kiki received her PhD from Duke University by pioneering a new field of study into the invention and adoption of marine conservation technology. Her research centers on the human dimensions of marine sustainability solutions, including fisheries, conservation technologies, and marine renewable energy. She also explores science dance as a means of science engagement and social change. Among her numerous honors and awards, she received an Alfred P. Sloan Research Fellowship in Ocean Sciences and has recently been appointed to the National Academies of Sciences Ocean Studies Board. She is now an associate professor at Arizona State University in the School for the Future of Innovation in Society. Tonight's BSL interpreter is Yvonne Strain. Her video will be visible throughout the talk, and during presentations, she will be shown on the right-hand side of the screen. You can scale that screen up by hovering over the video and using the arrow. Our closed captioner tonight is Ailish Murray. If you require closed captioning, the link to access this is in the chat function. Subtitles can also be accessed via the closed caption button at the bottom of the screen. Once you have clicked on the CC button, you can choose to view the subtitles or as a full transcription on the right-hand side of your screen. Tonight's talk will be followed by a Q&A session that will last approximately 15 minutes. If you would like to ask a question, please put these in the Q&A function, which you can find at the bottom of the screen. You can upvote questions that you find particularly interesting, and I will do my best to get to them. For the duration of this webinar, participants' cameras and microphones will be turned off. If you would like to tweet about tonight's event, please do so to RCS_the exchange. A full list of upcoming exchange talks can be found in the link that has just been put in the chat. And now I would like to invite Kiki to begin her presentation. Welcome, Kiki.
Thank you, Emily, and thank you to RCS and the Exchange for having me. I really wish I was there in person because I love Scotland. So I'm sad this is virtual, but I'm excited to be able to share some of these ideas with you. I'm going to be talking about the methods that I use and how I go about doing my science dances. And where this all started from, I'm going to tell you just a little bit of the backstory. So I was doing my PhD in graduate school, studying sea turtles and ways that we could protect them from drowning in fishing nets. And at the same time, I was continuing to dance and teach dance. And I would often find myself thinking about what my research would look like as a dance on stage. So I'm going to show you just a little bit about the science that I do. This will be the only kind of science thing you see in this short video. And this is an example of a sea turtle that is caught in a net and it hits these bars, and that's called a turtle excluder device. And it pushes big things like turtles out of the net so they can swim away to freedom. But smaller things like shrimp would have been able to fit through those bars and they would be able to catch them. So I was looking at those devices and how we can invent them more quickly because sea turtles were endangered and threatened with extinction. So when I was done with my PhD, my friends knew I had this idea, this dance in my head, and an organization called AAAS, the American Association for the Advancement of Science, started what they call their Dance Your PhD competition. Everyone emailed me, they said, Kiki, you have to enter. And so I did. And I'm just gonna show you a little tidbit of that dance. We choreographed it, practiced it, and filmed it all within 2 hours, and it won second place in the postdoc category that year. And what this is showing right now, female sea turtle round, which are close to shore, and that also is the same area in which we're pushing the fish. And at times in sea turtles' lives where they're most likely to be caught. The dancers were both semi-professional dancers as well as scientists who may do social dance or dance when they were a child or just was interested in taking part. And I just used the movement that they already had in their bodies, as you can see here with the social dance move. So after doing that dance and putting out the video and entering the competition, I noticed some things happening. So the competition posted a video on YouTube, and I started seeing in the discussion comments from fishermen about the video, what they thought about it. It was stimulating this discussion with the stakeholders. It also led people to see my work from new perspectives. So many of my friends who knew my research really well, my science friends, suddenly were asking me new questions they'd never asked me before after having seen this dance. It seemed to have put their brain into a different space. And then I also saw long-term retention of scientific information. So members of that dance have emailed me years later, in one case a decade later, to say, oh, I still remember that dance, and talking about the sea turtles, the turtle excluder device, what it all meant. And that led me to go, okay, we have science dances, it's not new, but so often we do it for the audience. And in this new YouTube era, we're doing videos for an audience that we can't even really engage with that much beyond the comments. But the impacts that I was seeing was, in some ways, the most long-term ones and lasting ones, I think, were with the participants themselves, the dancers themselves. And so that led me to want to create a participatory process for inventing these dances. And I did that for another dance your research competition. And I took a different approach this time. Instead of coming in with choreography in my head, we co-created it. I had two groups of dancers. One were experienced dancers. They were MFA students largely. And I actually gave them a scientific paper that I color coded. And you see just the abstract here, but the whole paper was color coded. It was one that I found to be most accessibly written, that most people could pick it up and understand the content. The dancers read it. They chose a role, one of the colors that they were going to embody. And they came into this space with about 30 seconds of movement already choreographed, representing that role, the findings from the work. And with those dancers, we talked about their inspiration, why they chose what they chose. We did movement showing and sharing and borrowing. And I knew that because these were more experienced dancers, they were used to choreographic processes, that I could really lean on them in that way to ask them to come prepared. There was another group of dancers that I worked with who were largely movers in some right, but not, some of them had a lot of training, some of them were rather new, they were passionate about moving, and then I had some just straight scientists in this space. And so with those, I did a series of mini lectures and knowledge sharing. In the mini lectures, you see me here at a public event, and mini lectures, we will be walking and moving in the space as I'm sharing information about sea turtles, but I'm also asking them to share what they know. What do you know about the oceans? What do you know about shrimp and how shrimp are caught, or how fisheries work? And so it's not just coming from me, this information. And for them, instead of asking them to invent movement before they arrived, we invented movement together. And we use a combination of structured improv, I would say, building on existing movement activities. So I use body surfing, as you see here in this image capture, to represent dead sea turtles, which are washed ashore, carried by ocean waves. And the people who are rolling dressed in blue are the water, the people who are in green are the dead sea turtles. We also use flocking. You can see 3 groups of flockers in this particular image. And the idea here is that in the paper, it talks about that fishermen will adopt and use the type of turtle excluder device that was invented near them, invented by someone that they know, and they'll follow that person and their reputation. So I could use these existing dance structures for people to be able to step in and be able to do this movement. And we did have some leaders of this. So you can kind of see at the front of each triad is an individual. And some of those individuals I did say, come with 5-10 seconds of movement, whatever movement you're comfortable with. It wasn't based on a theme. And then they just did some workshopping, some sharing, and then they just follow the leader. When I'm doing this, I tend to do it within a 2-hour workshop setting. And that's because I think that's the amount of time that people are willing to spend on a weekend or an evening. It's about the amount of time that they would go to the movies. When I have done this, and with the other movement activities that I do, sometimes people know each other, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they've known each other for just a few days or for a few hours. And so it's really important to read the space and to build safety, trust, confidence, community, and teamwork. Safety is both physical safety, but the idea of feeling safe to be themselves, to be able to trust that they won't be mocked or that they won't put something out there that will be consumed in a way that they don't want in terms of their movement. That they have confidence in their movement, that this dance isn't about being virtuosic or how high you can lift your leg. It's simply about moving as you feel moved by a scientific idea. And what really helps us to all these things to congeal is building this sense of community and these small groups working in teams. And when it works well, people make friends, they're exchanging phone numbers, they're sharing about their childhood dreams, they're laughing together. It feels like summer camp. So here's a short video that shows a little bit about how I would start a session like this to start building confidence, safety, and trust.
It is in your body and cast it away on the floor, out the window. Excellent. Now, as we're walking, I want you to find a place in the room where you feel good, wherever that is. Seems good to you, you like color, it's kind of warm, you're by the window, I don't care.
So what you saw here was I asked people to do what they do every day. I asked them to walk, but I asked them to just walk in a space. I didn't ask them to walk with purpose. They weren't going somewhere. And I began to ask them to move their body, but I put meaning towards it. So I'm saying to them, cast away fears you might have, anxieties you might have about what we're about to do. And then I asked them to start trying to move their body in expansive ways, putting their arms out there, things that might be seen as flailing if you were walking down the street and they might not normally do. They start small. You can see the discomfort. You can see the nervous giggles. You can see them making eye contact with each other, kind of saying, is this okay? Is it okay that I'm reaching out like this and being silly? And am I getting back from you that it's okay? Or I'm getting back some social chastisement that adults don't behave this way? And what they're seeing is, oh no, everyone's giggling, and it goes from a nervous giggle to a full laughter and an enjoyment. So we created this dance for another competition that actually ended up winning at first place in that competition. And with this one, I was really curious, how is this impacting the participants? And so we had observation, and we also had exit interviews where we asked 2 basic questions. What did you learn today, if anything? And tell us about your experience. And we found that they were expressing they learned new knowledge, that they were connecting this knowledge to their own interests. So a lot of times as scientists, we're asked to predict, like, how will your science benefit the world? And why is it valuable? And I think that I can predict that, this dance showed me that there are connections and values and interests that people have in my research that is not anything I could have conceived of, because I'm not in their experience. They were connecting it. They had a emotional response as well. So they became more concerned for sea turtles, more concerned for the wildlife in the oceans. And they expressed an increased appreciation for science, scientists, the value of what we do. They also expressed an interest to take action again. So they wanted to dance this dance again for new audiences, to share that information. And then there is also this peer-to-peer knowledge sharing, where they left that day, they'd had this experience that most people have not had before. And so if someone says, what'd you do this weekend? They're going to talk about the science dance. They're going to talk about being a dead sea turtle. But what fascinated me was they were using scientific terms and being true and faithful to the integrity of the scientific knowledge, which wasn't what I was saying that they had to do. They had taken this in enough, they understood it, and they wanted to impart it with that clarity. So that's my interpretation of what we found. I think it's really helpful to hear this from the dancers' own words. So I'm going to show you a longer video. This is about a 9-minute video of their responses coupled with segments from the dance.
I decided to participate today just kind of on a whim. I just wanted to do something that was a little bit different. I feel like combining scientific research with such a creative outlet is a really unique opportunity.
As a scientist, I'm very concerned about the impacts to sea turtles and basically our oceans and our planet in general. And I think that as a scientist and as a scientific community, we haven't been very successful in disseminating knowledge and in inspiring people. And I think art and the humanities and things like dancing can really help shed light on problems facing our planet, such as sea turtles drowning in fishing nets.
I participated today because I wanted to know a little more about the turtles.
I learned that turtles have lungs. Like, I didn't know that. And they're reptiles. Like, that's really cool. But also the fact that they're able to stay underwater for so long, but they do need to come up and breathe.
I think they're pretty awesome. They can live to be 150 years old. And I didn't know that they had lungs.
As silly as it may sound, I don't know why I never put two and two together, but I learned that sea turtles have lungs.
Sea turtles get stuck in nets and they drown.
When I think of sea turtles, I think about Finding Nemo. I don't know what else to say. And when Nemo was talking to his dad and he was like, I learned that they live to be 150 years old. I'm just, oh, this is great. Doing something about something that really matters in a field that I know nothing about. I am not a marine biologist. I am not a scientist. I am a dancer. But because I'm a dancer, it gives me the opportunity to engage in projects that are out of my field, and I get to acquire knowledge.
Sometimes we forget about creativity. We forget that we are not only scientists and researchers, we are also human beings who have a mind, who have creativity, who have ideas, and this is a beautiful way to show that.
I'm really interested in the intersection of dance and STEM-related fields, and I think when we intersect those two halves of ourselves, we can all benefit a lot.
Today was kind of a look into the realm of science and art communication. And I think as a scientist, having that ability to communicate with others and dance through movement and show that the world is not just black and white really makes a difference.
was really powerful, I think, being around people that are dancers and being around people that are good at things that you aren't. And so it was really cool being surrounded by people who aren't necessarily scientists and make people who are scientists realize that we don't know everything. It was cool to actually work with people who work in the marine biology community and actually see their understanding of everything that's going on and all the issues that are happening. And I feel today was a really eye-opening experience just to like kind of get a different perspective of what is actually going on, and working with those people really like opens your eyes to like this is actually happening with people you actually know that are trying to make a difference.
I express myself better through body movement than with words. And so this is a beautiful experience because I was able to show what I have inside, and there is no judgment, there is no embarrassment of doing this.
It went really well, exceptionally well. We did a lot of things in one take.
It was very quick, very efficient and effective.
At some point, Tess is going to fall back onto the TED, which the four you were holding. Can we recreate that moment? This other side, right? As a scientist and a dancer, I've always been fascinated about what my research will look like on stage as a dance. And that's what got me into doing science dances. I did my first one 10 years ago. And recently I got a couple of emails from the dancers who were in that first dance. They were telling me that they still remember being a sea turtle. That blew me away. This was 2 hours on a Saturday a decade ago, but yet they remember it. And to me, that speaks to the transformational power of science dance. It can translate and transmit lasting knowledge. And it got me thinking about this process, not just creating dances for an audience, but the impact of being a dancer and what that would mean to knowledge acquisition. So with this new dance, I'm focusing on that. I've already seen the power and impact of that. The week after we did this current dance, I had people walking up to me on campus saying, "Oh, hey, my friends were in your dance. They were sea turtles." And they were relating the knowledge that their friends had learned, facts about my research, back to me. So we're seeing that they're sharing it from person to person. It's spreading peer to peer. The other thing that really surprised me, actually, was that we had graduate students in this dance. They are scholars in their own right, and they were building connections between my research and the theories in their work, connections I would never have seen. So it's really interdisciplinary. I think it's leading to new knowledge creation and lasting knowledge transfer. It's really powerful.
I wanted to talk a little bit about my process of coming up with movement. I read through the article and I kind of extracted, I had the main idea of my section, and then I extracted specific words and then associated movement qualities with each of those words, the strongest and most reoccurring being expert.
We all have an artist within us, and I think it's great that people can use that as a universal language to connect with people and share concepts and relate on an emotional level.
What I love to point out here is that I see everyone who takes part in this as a choreographer. They are all bringing some portion of themselves to the movement, and either choreographing in a dance or choreographing in the stage, working in groups, creating movement. So that's why I make sure to comment all of that. In addition to doing these videos, which are typically for competitions, we will also do live performances. This is a picture from First Friday that we have in Phoenix. And I don't know if you have First Friday events there in Scotland, but a lot of arts organizations, galleries will put up booths all along a street. And typically there's dozens to hundreds, depending on the size of the First Friday booths, and people move fairly quickly through them. We found that people were spending like half an hour at our booth, which was just unimaginable. And we are literally in the middle of the street. You can see cars behind us. We're dancing in between doing the live performance. There was a video of the dance. People would stay and watch both. And then after that, intermittent, we would have a kind of live stage show. So you can see this in the bottom left corner, where we're talking about the technology. We're bringing people up from the audience. We have someone in a turtle suit who's acting out the turtle dying and being saved by different technologies. And both of those things then help to route the audience into a hands-on station where they're looking at other aspects of sea turtle life, the threats to them, how we can help them survive. And you can see just this huge staff of people who came together to do this. Half of them are the dancers. And so we really were a huge attraction there when we did First Friday. So that's the 2-hour-long dance workshop that I do. But I'll also do shorter participatory movement activities. And these are anywhere from 5 minutes to 15 or 20-minute exercises. You saw that video, that warm-up video, was with this crowd. And in this top picture, you can see me getting them to begin to expand the space that they're willing to take up. And they're doing this in concert. I'm asking them to get as big as possible. Again, they're being reinforced by the group. Hey, I'm not alone in making this. They're still, you see them making eye contact and looking at each other, affirming this is okay. It's also building community. Down here in the bottom right, this event was called Falling Walls. And the idea was breaking the walls between science and society. And so they all had science engagement projects that did this. So we did an exercise where they built a wall. These people came from all over the world, different cultures. We only had a day together. And so to build this wall, they also engaged in a permission process where they said, I would like to connect to you by touching your shoulder or touching your head. Is that okay? And each person had to give consent. So it recognized that, hey, we're not going to take offense if someone doesn't understand everything about our culture or how we like to be engaged and touched, but we're going to go through this honest effort of asking permission and making it clear that you have control over your body and what happens to it. And then from there, they get into these small groups and they start creating movement to express some of their concepts. And even people who have never choreographed before are starting to choreograph and really trust each other. So you can see here, someone's about to step up on someone else's knee. So this person's willing to be a support. This man's willing to step up and over. And the process has gotten them to that place where they trust each other and they're excited about the ideas that they're creating. So that was all well and good. And then COVID happened. And the question becomes, well, what do you do? So at first things just stopped. But I had a couple of opportunities to do virtual science dances. And they were more like the participatory movement, just 5 minutes or so. And I was really focused on how do I get that feeling and the energy and the connectivity that I have in an actual space into a virtual space. There's some obvious ones. Use music. Even if you're not dancing and you have a Zoom session, if you start with music, you're setting a mood. People start moving and grooving, and you can say like what this space is about and define it through the music. There's some other things I do. So I'm going to ask Claire and Emily to join me on screen for this one. So thank you for volunteering. One of the things I was concerned about is this screen to me blocks energy. And I wanted to connect and I wanted to share energy. And then it occurred to me that this camera is kind of interesting because if I reach towards it, it's almost like a 3D movie. I can come into your space. So one of the things I did, really simple, was I made an energy ball. And then I would say, hey, Emily, I want to toss you some of my energy. Will you catch it? Will you catch my energy? And then Emily can add something to that energy ball, and she can shape it, and she can toss it to Claire. And the more that we get close and come away from this camera, it really does send you something, the stop, or the I have something to give, and you feel like you can pick this up. The other part of this is what I call reclaiming the frame, that we have all these videos now on how to look good on YouTube, and the idea, and I just did this actually, getting ready for this talk. You sit a certain way, you light your face a certain way, you're certain close to the camera, and all of that prescribes how we have to be in front of the screen and in our bodies. And so with these dances, I like to reclaim the frame, push out the frame, and Emily and Claire are going to give some examples along with me of things that you can do to break that. So some things I like to do are like how I pop up and pass out of the screen. I might decide to creep along the screen. All these different ways. And it can just be simple things of just a peekaboo. How do you appear? And controlling that instead of it controlling you. Thank you, Emily and Claire, for doing that demo with me. So I'm going to show you a video I have of one of my first attempts at this. It doesn't incorporate all of those principles, but I think you can see from the expressions of the participants how it can be transformative for them.
It's not too late for making a new world. It's not too late. I sat in my room so this morning, feeling that I can communicate with you. So I picked up my stars, picked up paper and pen. I know there is causes to defend. Roots will find a way, illuminate the mystery, return to the source. All isn't lost. It's not too late for making a better world. It's not too late for making a new world.
I say good things come to days who really wait. But not to them the really way too late. They see it's never too late for a shower of rain. Baby, to me.
The essence of this life we must really explore in order to find peace one day. So I picked up my thought, picked up paper and pen. I know there are causes to defend.
See, I love that. Hey, but the good things come to days who really wait. But not them that's way too late, as I would say. So we should forget about the hate and the war and stop penetrating the discriminators. I will tell you, no way, baby.
It's not too late for making a better world.
Hey, no, what I would say.
It's not too late for making a new world.
So let them hear, as I would tell you, baby. Let me with them sounding bad.
Now everybody stand up and let's spread these words around the neighborhood. Return to the source, all isn't lost. No. It's not too late.
I said to them, but never too late, as I would tell you, baby.
It's not too late for making a new world.
It's just one word.
It's not too late for making a better world. The world is changing beyond recognition, and it's not too late. No, don't seal your fate with radiation, with that pollution and all that confusion. No.
It's just never too late for us to realize. It's just one big word and one people. One love and one unity.
So in that dance, I think that you can see the transformation of the people. So you can see the energy they're getting. You can see how comfortable they are in the space. you actually can see that it's drawing in other folks. So again, someone's coming in from outside saying, what's going on here? In that dance, I use something called build a phrase, which I'm going to talk about a little bit later, where I just gave them a basic structure. They already had one gesture that represented their project. They were all science engagers. That happened as an aside, something else that had existed for them. And I used that gesture. So their project, whatever that is, and I gave them the gesture in a virtual world is, and then they filled in what it is for them. And they had a chance to talk about it in small groups and make up that gesture and share about it. And then we came back to make the dance. I said, you can come in and out as many times as you want. You can play with the speed of it. So I gave them just a few rules to work with to create this dance. And the energy change, the chat blew up, was really moving and transformative to me. I didn't even know it was going to work, and it was great. So that's what we've been doing in virtual spaces. Another thing that I want to touch on a little bit is moving science dances from more informal spaces to formal spaces. So I've been asked by various colleagues, can you do a science dance for my classes? First time I did one was for a middle school physics teacher. And recently I have an existing collaboration with a collegiate level anatomy and physiology professor, Greg Crowther of Everett Community College in Washington State. And Greg makes science songs or science jingles. And I'm going to show you one of those. And he wanted to add movement to these jingles as a way to try to help his students engage with it more and to learn. So here's just an example of one of his jingles, his second most popular one on YouTube. I could keep playing that song because I think it's awesome, but I won't. So you can see there's a lot of material in that particular song. Not all the songs are that way. That one was a parody of an existing song, My Sharona, but he also does original songs. So in starting this collaboration of adding movement to his science jingles, I focus on certain things. I focus on what are the key ideas? What's the main idea that you want the students to come away with? I look for analogous movement. So movement is everywhere in science. When I grew up in the US, there was a kids show called 3, 2, 1 Contact. It focused on a lot of things, but there's a lot of science. And the theme song was, contact is the reason, is the answer, that everything happens, contact, da 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 da. Let's make contact, da 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 da. 3, 2, 1, contact. And to me, this was like an amazing idea. I remember being a kid and trying to think of like anything in the world that happened without contact. Like, is contact really the reason and the answer? And to this day, I have yet to find anything where there wasn't contact. And I will sometimes have scientists that say, well, I'm an archaeologist or I study climate change, and like, show me where the movement is there. And there's movement in all of it. The movement might come across ages and eras as opposed to something immediate that you might see as a sea turtle moving. It may be at the subatomic level, atoms or molecules or cells, but there's movement. So I look for those analogous movements. I also sometimes focus on the difficult to understand ideas that students struggle with a lot. And so by bringing movement to that, that gives them another way to think it through. Going back to those sea turtle science dances that led my science friends to ask me questions. Again, trying to move the students into a different headspace where they might understand those concepts better. And then also making implicit ideas explicit. So in some of Greg's songs, particularly the parodies, where he's trying to fit within the tune and the meter of the music, he might have to use symbols. And and analogies that might not make the scientific ideas really explicit. So I can partner movement with those sections to make it clear what the science is behind those lyrics. And all of this is really fun. I love doing it. Participants seem to love doing it with me. But I, as a scientist, couldn't help but ask myself, what's the science of science dance? Am I doing this because it's fun and people seem to have fun? Or am I really transforming something? Because I'm at the point now with this work where I'm pursuing grants to scale it up and move it to a programmatic level. And I didn't want to take funds and money that could go to something else that made a difference in the world if this wasn't, other than having a good time on a Saturday. So we got money from the National Geographic Society to answer the question, how does creating and participating in science dance impact participants' knowledge, attitudes, and behaviors towards sea turtle conservation? We have set up a pre, post, and delayed post test, knowledge test. So they map out everything they know about sea turtles. They do the dance, they map it out again, and then 6 weeks later, we call them up and we map it out again. We had a control, so we had the science dance, but we also had a science cafe style lecture, almost like a TED talk and engaging, but just listening to someone in a Q&A. And then we also had a non-kinesthetic science theater. So people are using their voice and maybe some props, but not their body, to create creative projects and products from the science that they learned. We also measured attitudes and empathy particular along these stages, and we measured actions by giving them money at different points, and we would have giving them money that they could decide to donate to a sea turtle nonprofit. We were 2 weeks away from doing our first session, and then COVID happened, and so this is on hold for a while because I think to do this well, we need to be able to do this, see each other's faces. We can't just have masks. I've been doing some work with creative processes and having most of our face covered. It's so hard to express even basic things like, I'm looking at you, even though we have our eyes, because so much more goes into that. So you may be asking, this is great, this is exciting, I want to do this, how do I do this? Well, you can start the way I did with competing. There are a number of these science dance competitions out there. The AAAS Dance Your PhD competition is the most famous. Anyone from around the world can enter, and you can have any sorts of dancers. You can have kids, whatever, as long as someone in there has a PhD and that's what their work is around. You can collaborate, invite dancers, choreographers into your space, into your field, into your lab. There's existing curriculums and there's ways to create these dances. I'm going to focus my last couple of minutes on those. So my friend and mentor who I have admired for a very long time, Liz Lerman, has created a number of techniques for this. And she has this one website that focuses on genomics and genetics with toolkits and lesson plans to use from middle school to college level. And so if that's your interest, you can use that or use it as a model. Her organization, Dance Exchange, has a chooser tool. So you can go into this and click off things like how many people, what type of space you have. Do you have space to move? Are they sitting in chairs? What type of content are you delivering? You check it off in the filter, and then it chooses some of these structured movement activities that you can use. And then it gives you just instructions, shows you videos of how that all might work. One of my favorites to start with is Build a Phrase. Build a Phrase works almost anytime, anywhere. And with that, I have 30 seconds left to go here. If you want to see more of the work that I'm doing, you can check out my webpage, kikijenkins.com/SciDance. That's what my initiative is called, SciDance. And with that, I will stop, and thank you again for having me.
Thank you, that was really wonderful. And the great news is Kiki will be back in a couple of weeks to talk more about some more of her work as part of the art making in the Anthropocene series. So you can hear more about what she does then. So I'm gonna direct some questions towards Kiki. There's two that are very similar, so I'm gonna sort of combine them and ask them together. From Stephanie Edwards, and Simon Vanderwalt. And the question is about music, wondering how do you choose the music for your science dances? And have you ever collaborated with composers or worked with live improvising musicians in your workshops?
That's a good question. So the music often is in my head from when I'm thinking about an idea or thinking again about the energy that I want to portray. A lot of times when I'm working with people who aren't dancers, I like to use the music as an atmosphere. I don't want them to be worrying about counts and when they need to come in on or anything like that. That it sets a mood and they can just move in that space, kind of a la Merce Cunningham. I would love to work with composers. Early on, when I started doing more science art, I commissioned a science song. One of my kind of issues and concerns is there aren't huge pots of money to do science dance. And I think it's important to convey the value of musicians' work and other artists' work. And so I want to be able to pay people a fair wage for what they do. And as this grows, I think after the Nat Geo project and we show that there's value in science dance and what that is, when I grow the program I'm hoping to grow, then hopefully there'll be funds for live musicians. But until then, I haven't done that for that reason. I want to honor and be able to pay them for the work, and I can't right now.
Great, and I have a question for you. I've actually known Kiki for many years, and I also do, many of you know me here, but some of you don't. I also do a lot of interdisciplinary work between music, and I collaborate a lot with biologists, both in doing research and in creating music. And one thing that I noticed, which I'm sure Kiki has also encountered, is that many people think, oh, science and the arts is a great way to communicate science, but they don't think about what the arts can also contribute to science. They tend to think of it as a one-way communication. I know Kiki is somebody who really values the influence in both directions. So one of the questions is just, can you talk at all about times when maybe you've realized that during your dance, you've approached the science in a new way? What has that been? Or have you had the experience of getting scientists involved in your workshops, and then have they talked about sort of new approaches to their work? I know sometimes it can be hard to figure out what the specifics are, but I'm just curious if you have examples.
So what I have noticed is it puts my brain in a different space. It doesn't even have to be my work. I could be watching someone else's work. And not that we have a true left brain, right brain, but I do have a kind of creative space in my head and my more kind of analytical science space. And I can shift myself depending on what I'm working in, watching, or engaging. And so I think there's value in that. And I had a PhD advisor who really believed that good, great, transformative science comes out of a place of creativity. And so you have to feed that creative space. My first year in graduate school, I was at Duke University, which is the home of the American Dance Festival. And in graduate school at a university like Duke, or maybe most universities, people feel this imposter syndrome and a need to show that they deserve to be there. So all of my classmates rushed to go do scientific research in the field. And I emailed my advisor and I said, I can't be at the home of ADF and not dance. Like, do you mind if I just dance this summer? And he said, absolutely, because that's going to feed your creativity to make you a better scientist. I will say, kind of to the first part of your question, Emily, I still struggle with that balance. In some ways, I've embraced that if I'm doing this for science engagement, I am using dance as a vehicle for the science. And just saying that gives the science a little bit of supremacy in that over the dance. But I try as much as possible to have some parity. So one of the things that you might see in other science dances is there's the movement, but then they'll have words on the screen. And you're literally reading the science. And that's something that I don't do in mine. That I think that movement is a strong enough communication tool and module that if you really tap into its full potential, it can express so much. And I see that in the live performances, particularly with kids, because kids have no filter. So they'll say things like, "It's the ocean, Mom," because they recognize those bodies moving as waves. Or when the sea turtle dies, they may not know it's a turtle, but they'll go, "That lady just died." And so the power of movement can communicate. You don't need to supplement it with our science words, because then we're taking away with what it can gift.
Yeah, that's great. And I didn't mean to imply that, that using arts for scientific communication is, a negative thing. And I've certainly been involved with that as well. But just, I think there's many people who just go that far and then stop there without recognizing the potential for both fields to influence each other. And for myself, one thing I've also noticed is that people tend to work together very differently in the arts versus in the sciences. So it's been really helpful to learn, to navigate between different communities and just learn how people interact and how they develop ideas together in different kinds of ways. Are there any more questions from the audience? If not, I have one more question. Okay, so another question I have for you. I'm just wondering, are there any aspects, oh, wait, here's a question from the audience. So I'll ask that and then I'll ask mine if there's time. Do you ever encourage vocalization by the participants along with the motion, not necessarily words, just sound production as part of the creative process? And this is from Sandy Coffin.
So that's interesting. When I'm just functioning as a choreographer, then I really like vocalization, be it live or part of the recording. With this, no, I haven't. I don't think that that's an implicit thing. An explicit thing there was like, I'm not going to do this. But if I tap in really quickly about why I haven't, I think it has to do with the 2-hour format and that safety, comfort, trust, confidence space I'm creating. Typically, I'm doing this by myself with maybe a dozen or more people in the room. And so it's one thing to get people to move silently. To get them to vocalize on top of it is harder. I will sometimes have them vocalize as part of the warm-up activity, where if they're taking something off their chest, to say the word that I'm taking off, imposter syndrome. I always have them talk in concert so that you don't feel like someone's listening to just you as you're doing that. But it's always been as a warm-up activity, not necessarily in the movement. Although I've had training of how to do that, and I have done that with kind of straight dances. So that's interesting. Something I would explore more, particularly if I created long-term relationships with the same group of people or same institution. It could come back again and again. Most of the time, I'm doing these one-off things.
Great. Any more questions from the audience? Okay, then I'll ask my one other question. And I'm just wondering, when you're choosing which bits of your scientific research to also address through dance, do you feel like you could take any of your research and also do dance related to it? Or is there a certain kind of research that fits well with dance and another kind of research that you think of sort of completely separately from that?
So I think you could take any research and do this, but it also goes back to time. So Liz Lerman, who's created these amazing Ferocious Beauty genome, for example, she embeds her dancers. That she did a dance at CERN, the Origin of Matter, where they're there for long periods of time and residencies to think about, develop those movements. When I'm working in the 2-hour setting or a 5-minute dance, I'm often moving through, I'll ask the audience, what's the title of your most recent scientific paper? And I'll get 6, 7, 8 ideas, looking for ones that are visual, that have movement in them, that have active verbs that can use and leverage really quickly. Because of the time constraints that I decide to put myself under. But if you had all the time in the world, I think any science could be made into a dance, because again, there's movement everywhere in the world, everywhere in nature, everywhere in physics.
That's a great thought, and perhaps a good thought for wrapping up this talk as well. Thanks so much, Kiki. This was really wonderful. And I'd like to thank everyone for joining us tonight. Thank you to our BSL interpreter, Yvonne Strain, and to our closed captioner, Ailish Murray. Thank you to the Research and Knowledge Exchange team for organizing this term's events. Please follow us on Twitter. It's RCS_the exchange. It's also in the comments. A link to the full schedule of exchange talks this term has been posted in the chat. Next week's talk will be Ecologies of Pain, presented by Dr. Sarah Hopfinger. Thanks again to the audience for tuning in. Thank you, Kiki. And this concludes this week's Exchange Talk. We look forward to having you join us next week.
Thank you.